Ain't nobody fucking with my.
Hello everybody, how's everyone doing today? And today I'm going to talk about a different topic, something that you guys probably didn't know I was into, but I'm a huge Eminem fan. And today I want to talk to you guys about how I feel about his really controversial new album, Revival. I personally think it's one of his more emotional and touching albums, but everybody seems to be hating it recently. And it does kind of bother me, man. Like, I'm a huge Eminem fan. I've heard every single album he has ever released, all the way back in Infinite in 1996, all the way to now Revival 2017, and everything in between, man. I've heard everything, each EP, all his collab albums and everything. I'm a huge fan, and I'm kind of upset about how Revival was received by the general public. Like, it's still doing pretty, it's doing really well in sales right now, about 600,000 units sold first week worldwide. That's pretty solid for an album, but it's just sad to me how, I don't know, man, people just aren't liking it. I personally think it's a really decent album. Not his worst, not his best, just, right there, stuck in between. Okay, let's compare it to his worst album, Revival. Okay, I've heard the album. I've heard all his singles: Untouchable, River, Walk on Water with Beyonce, and the singles were kind of meh. Like, Untouchable had a really good message and cool concept behind it, with really good flow and delivery, but the production, the sound, the beat, the instrumental, that's what the problem was. But the second half of the song was very, was redeemed it pretty well. Like, the second half of that song was really good, and talking about the black person's perspective and how they separated us, sectionated us. You remember that? You guys remember that, don't you? Walk on Water, super emotional song with Beyonce, talking about his relevance and his current standpoint in the rap business. Really touching song, guys. In my opinion, that was a beautiful song. Beyonce had a really good hook. Total solid song. And then River, classic radio hit. And that's where my problems start to arise. Like, Eminem in this album made a lot of radio songs that, didn't sound like Eminem. It sounded like Drake or one of these new rappers, man, that just makes a lot of radio music. And that was one of my biggest problems with Recovery. It was so much like pop-ish music with so many female singers on the hook. But even though that's not the problem, because Stan, which is one of Eminem's greatest and all of rap history greatest songs ever created, had a female hook. But that's one exception to the countless radio songs that Eminem created with female hooks in them. And that's where the biggest number one problem of the entire album arises, is that the whole song sounds very poppy and polished and just doesn't sound like the grimy and controversial and super energetic and angry, vigorous Eminem that we've been accustomed to. Even the Marshall Mathers LP2 sounded more exciting and energetic than Revival did. I'm not saying that it was boring album. Very interesting album with a lot of sad, mostly sad, and very dramatic songs in it. Bad Husband, Arouse, Castle, Need Me, all of these very personal songs talking about Eminem's love life with Kim. But that's the problem, man. Like, the best songs on that album are the songs where there isn't a female hook and Eminem just going off with this crazy erratic flow and his insane rhyme schemes and crazy topics. Like, my favorite song on that album was Offended, and in that song, man, he was saying some crazy shit, and he just had crazy bars and really good instrumental. I really like the instrumental for Offended, and how the bass comes in when he's going off a little bit harder, and the bass just kicks in, and then like that was a really good song for me. And his flow on that song was freaking crazy, guys. That was some of the best flow of Eminem I've heard in recent memory. And Framed I also loved was because, again, with the crazy instrumental and the crazy flow. And in that song it sounded like almost like it was from Recovery. Not Recovery, I'm sorry, I meant Relapse. And personally, Relapse is my favorite Eminem album. You guys might be surprised, like what the hell, Relapse was garbage. I'm sorry guys, I apologize, I am kind of stiff and, you know, snuffling a little bit, so please just mind that. But yeah guys, Framed, amazing, phenomenal song, one of his best songs in recent memory, since like, you know, Rap God or some song like that. But Framed, crazy song, one of the best songs of Eminem in recent memory. Offended, amazing song. And another song that I thought was really good was Believe. That song had one of Eminem's greatest instrumentals I've heard to date, with that hi-hat, man, like that just touched my soul. And his delivery on that, and just the rhyme scheme and the flow, everything was just on point. And like these are some of Eminem's best songs. And if you look at the trends in these songs, is no female hook. Eminem was sticking to his, you know, regular crazy flow, wasn't trying to make a radio hit, and those somehow ended up being his best songs. The songs that didn't sound like they were belonging in radio, the songs that were, you know, a little bit crazier and zanier and more erratic flow than usual. And that's what Eminem needs to stick to, man. And that's where the problem comes in this album, that most of the songs in this album have very similar topics about Kim and bad relationships and stuff like that. Like, it was supposed to be political. He did take a bunch of shots at Trump, like Back Home, calling him Adolf Hitler, but the message in this album was kind of all over the place. Didn't make like completely that much sense, in my opinion. Like, first he starts the album with Believe Me. Oh no, Walk on Water, talking about his career and how, you know, he's on a downhill, and everything is just not going for him, and his career's like kind of done. And then he goes to Believe Me, talking about how the spotlight's back on him, and talking about how his loyal fan base, and, you know, how he still has it. Like, I still agree, Eminem is always going to be the greatest rapper of all time, in my personal opinion. And that's kind of what he's talking about in Believe Me. And then he goes to a song called Chloroseptic, which, you know, just stupid, funny song, you know, kind of dissing out people in that song, making fun of current rappers. In my opinion, Chloroseptic was a pretty nice song, but it kind of caters to, you know, modern day music and the high bass and the like, you know, that standard flow that every new rapper has these days, like especially like 21, Kodak, like all these current rappers, you know, they have this very generic flow that easy to adapt. Like, Eminem tries to cater to that flow in a little bit, but it had a pretty decent hook as well. Like, in my opinion, some of the hooks in this song were bad. Like, Framed had a pretty bad hook. Offended, like, I feel like that was intentionally a bad hook, but yeah, the hook in that was like mediocre, is alright, but it was a pretty good song, you know. Broadens the audience of the people who listen to his music. And like, another problem with the album was the instrumentals. A lot of the instrumentals that Rick Rubin produced didn't sound too good. Like, they sounded so country, and it doesn't fit Eminem's tone of anger and passionate rapping. Like, I don't know what Rick Rubin is doing, man. In my opinion, Rick Rubin is the worst thing to happen to Eminem's music. Like, one of my favorite Eminem verses of all time is in Medicine Man, and that whole album was produced by Dre, and so was that song and the beat and everything, and that's one of Eminem's greatest verses to date. He's rapping his ass off with a crazy ass beat that's also catchy and bumps, you know, like a lot of people that listen to Drake and that, you know, just very instrumental heavy music, they can bump that song strictly because of how it's constructed and and the beat, but Eminem is still rapping some really crazy lyrical bars with some insane rhyme schemes, man. Eminem, that's one thing that always ceases to impress me with Eminem, is that his rhyme schemes, the shit he rhymes is just on some next level, guys. Like, that's one thing that Eminem will always be good at, man. Like, he rhymes, everything rhymes with everything. And if you look at some of the patterns on YouTube and stuff, like, it's really impressive, man. But even with all the crazy rhymes that he does have, he still manages to have a pretty mediocre delivery and production. But that's not, production isn't even his fault. Well, it is, but I just think he could have done better. This album would have been so much better if it was produced by Dre. If he kept everything else, changed instrumentals or production, and just had Dre on there, it would have been amazing. But like, Rick Rubin and himself aren't the greatest rappers, in my opinion. But yeah, okay, let's compare this album to my worst album by Eminem, which is Relapse. And I'm not gonna lie, guys, this album did sound, not Relapse, oh, I'm very sorry, I meant Recovery. Relapse is my favorite, by the way. I meant Recovery. So yeah, in my opinion, Recovery is Eminem's worst album. And if you compare that to this album, I'm sorry to say, but like, they sound really similar, guys. Recovery and Revival sound so identical that if you put the name Recovery 2 on this album, it would have sold more, and the title would have fit as Recovery 2. That's what it sounds like. A lot of the songs with Pink and Alicia Keys and Kalani, like, all these songs sound like they were straight from Recovery. Like, and even back then, Recovery was a huge success, but the biggest criticism to that album was literally that it didn't have the greatest like instrumentals, didn't have the greatest hooks. It was just Eminem rapping, just showing off, like, we have bars, yeah, we get it, you have some nice bars and you're good at rhyming words, but sometimes, like, and he was really, like, okay, he had the passion and energy in that album, and it was a very good public album, but as an Eminem fan, I didn't like it as much, especially after Relapse, which I personally loved because of how crazy it was and the subject matter of the album, and especially the production. The production on that album was the best production Eminem ever had in any album to date, comparable to MLP2, but Relapse always gets the edge for me, man. Those beats, Medicine Ball, Wide Awake, man, those beats were just untouchable. And this album really does sound like another Recovery, guys. Aside from a few songs, Framed, which sounds like it was straight from Relapse, which happens to be my favorite song, and a lot of other people agree on it, that Framed was most likely the best song of the album. And it sounded like Relapse. He had a subject matter of like a killer, a vodka trump in my car, saying some crazy lines. Aside from, you know, not the best hook in the world, but it was tolerable in my opinion. And guys, I listen to Eminem all the time. I listen to like at least 10 of his songs every day I'm out, man. I'm in the car, always bumping these songs, his older songs, his newer songs. So trust me, guys, I have a huge grasp on how Eminem works. And this Recovery, super fast, edgy flow, super polished beats, and just all this huge poppy, glamour type music that he's making does not suit his personality whatsoever, guys. And it shows on the album. Like, we didn't like it in Recovery, and even in MLP2, you know, he kind of changed it up. That's why MLP2 was, you know, a really good album in my opinion. It was amazing. Of course, not as good as the first and Marshall Mathers LP, of course, but like, that was legendary rap album, if probably the greatest rap album ever created, in my opinion. But yeah, he needs to change up the super glossy flow that he has, guys, man. And the album isn't garbage, okay? He has some of his best tracks on this album: Offended, Framed, and Castle, guys. Castle is absolutely a beautiful song. It's right up there with Stan, with Lose Yourself, Mockingbird, all of these legendary songs that Eminem have. Castle is right up there, man. The story he tells, the way he tells it, his delivery, the chorus, the beat, and everything about that song is just classic Eminem. Classic Eminem. With the beautiful story, talking about his daughter. It felt like a Stand Part 2. Even though Bad Guy was technically Stand Part 2, but I'm talking about the sound and production and story, and the way he told the story in that song. It was absolutely beautiful, guys. And Arouse as well, which is kind of a follow-up to Castle. Even that song was beautiful. Like, both of these songs were excellent. Some of Eminem's best work. Examples: Believe Me, Chloroseptic, Framed. Like, these songs are great, guys. This album is very similar to Encore. How people always defend Encore, saying that it's not his worst album, it just had a few bad songs. That's what I feel like this is, but it only has a few good songs. So that's my final thoughts on the album, guys. I'm a huge Eminem fan, and I was really disappointed with this album. But man, some of the highlights of this album are so good, and I listen to Offended multiple times a day. I listen to Frames 10 times a day, guys. These songs are so you can repeat them, listen to them all the time, and you will be amazed each time you listen to it, just like how I am. And yeah, guys, in my opinion, you know, I would give it like a 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10. Kind of disappointed with this one, guys. And I don't know how to tell you guys, man. I'm a huge Eminem fan, and I just expected something a little better. Even something that was close to Marshall Mathers WW2, I would have been happy with, but we didn't even get that, man. Alright, guys, have a blessed day, and enjoy the rest of the gameplay.